Hello, hello, hello. It's Stephanie here, and welcome aboard episode 65 of the Rent to Rent Success podcast. And you are going to love today's episode because we are talking about building wealth. Whether you're new to property or whether you're already experienced, you're going to love this episode's of insights into how to build your own wealth, how to build your life, and how to build the lives of those around you. Now, I love rent to rent as a business model. It's a cash flow business that enables you to get started with little money. But what I also advocate is building long-term wealth by buying and owning assets too. And today I'm delighted to welcome Kevin Whelan. And he's going to be talking about going from a consumer mindset to a wealth builder's mindset. Kevin is a serial entrepreneur. He's founder of Wealth Builders. He's the host of WealthTalk podcast. He's a 5 times published author and funder. And welcome to the show, Kevin Whelan.
Hi there, Stephanie. What a great introduction. How about that? I was very pleased with that. Anyway, it was so lovely to hear from you. And it's so good that you're thinking broader than simply property. I think that's a very interesting insight you've got rather than just focusing on one. Building wealth in multiple pillars, particularly at a time like now when, it's very poignant, isn't it? We're seeing the fragility of job income and other things to think about wealth in multiple ways, like multiple eggs in multiple baskets is the best way to be financially bulletproof, whatever the economic weather throws at us. So thanks for the introduction and thanks for the invitation.
I've been keen to get to you on the podcast ever since you came across our horizon. As you know, Kevin, we started in property in the last 5 years, and it kind of blows my mind a little bit that we're now thinking about assets and passing things down in trusts and how to invest our pensions and how to save more, save and invest more tax efficiently, and doing that through a SAS pension. And that's how I came across you. And I also need to give, or would love to give to people listening, a shout out to the WealthTalk podcast, which you have a phenomenally wide range of people coming on there talking about their own wealth journeys. And I find that so inspiring.
Well, it's good that you've acknowledged the podcast, and you were a great guest on there. And we had very good feedback on that one in particular. So thank you for doing that. But it's nice to be able to have free reign to give a breadth of opportunity for different guests who speak about wealth in all of its different spectrums. And as you know, my own IP is to say there are only seven and only 7 assets you can use to build wealth. Therefore, it gives me lots of opportunity to invite experts and people with insights and inspiration in all 7. So it gives me more flexibility, have more guests.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've learned a lot. People I thought I kind of knew their story, and I got a lot more insights behind the scenes once I listened to your podcast. And I listened to Ellie Mackay recently. That was really very good. And for anybody interested, I did look this up beforehand, Kevin. My episode on Wealth Talk is episode 82, if you want to check that out. And Kevin, a lot of people are overwhelmed when they're thinking about wealth building. They've been used to being employees, they've maybe got a pension, and they wouldn't know where to start. So what's the first thing that you think someone would do if they were just listening to this and thinking, I don't know where to start, what should I do?
Well, the starting point is really to begin with awareness. And one of the things that I would say is at the cornerstone of wealth building is understand, first of all, why would you even be bothered about this? So, one of the key things to understand then is the difference between work income and asset income. Because, whatever you do when you're trading time for money, inevitably that time for money trade-off is going to stop. Building assets defined as something you own that is not you. It puts money into your bank account while you're asleep. It allows you to continue to receive income, so the money shows up, but you don't need to show up. And you can pass that money on to the next generation to spouses and families, or to good causes. So these are the ingredients, and the big difference between the two is just to recognize it. So I'd start there because in the end, if you're trading time for money, you'll be doing that forever. And then
Mm.
one day you'll stop, and then you then have to have an income from somewhere if you're carrying on working, or you're carrying on living. So the key thing is to understand that. Once you understand that, that there is a difference between work income and asset income, and that there are only 7 assets you could possibly own, then set about the knowledge of understanding what those 7 are, and that will be the starting point. So a little bit of education will mean the overwhelm doesn't set, because you're just on a journey of learning, right? So you can then discover what to do as you dive deeper into different things that we could get into, such as what are your interests? What's your best form of leverage? How much time do you have? What age are you on now? Have you got a team around you? Have you got other people supporting you? There's so many different things that you can bring into the mix, but it all starts with what's in here first.
Yeah, that's what's in your head first. So actually, let's move on then to the 7 pillars, because I'm sure everybody's dying to know. They may be shouting at their iPhones right now, giving the answer to what these 7 pillars are. So I'd love you to go through those, Kevin.
Yeah, sure. The best way to do it is to, almost as I describe it, maybe even draw them. Almost if you imagine you're drawing a circle or even a square, whatever your favorite shape is fine. And if you imagine it's a square, then draw 3 lines to the right and 4 lines to the left. So you're going to see things on opposites. And we'll just describe each of them. Now, the important thing then to understand is the first 3, most people have in their life. And the reason why 95% of the population don't make it to achieving financial independence is because they only have these 3.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll go on to describe the other 4, which if you then put them to work in combination, you can achieve financial independence. And for most people that we help on that journey, they probably get to financial independence after about 5 years. So 5 years is about the average it takes to become completely financially independent. So 5 years worth of doing and learning is kind of more fun and more interesting than 30 or 40 years of working and hoping.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I love that. 5 years of doing and learning is a lot more fun than winging and hoping. And many of the jobs, many people who might be listening to this really don't want to be in there for 40 years or beyond.
yeah.
So yes, let's go through them.
Okay. So the first one we call home capacity. I'll describe the first 3 and then I'll tell a little about them just briefly. The second is pensions, and the third is investments. So most people, you just need to reread or reconnect to Rich Dad Poor Dad. This is the standard thing, go to work, get good grades, get a good education, get a job, stay in the job for as long as you can, get a good pension, and that's you sorted. Well, okay, those days are long gone, but still the tradition is people have these 3. So the first one is they have a home. They will often consider their home as an asset, and it is a potential asset. Almost everything is a latent asset, has the potential to create recurring income. But for most people who live in their home, they don't create an income from it. So the recurring income they would get if they were adding it, I'd ask your listeners to think about how much is coming from each of these 7. So right now, how much is coming from pillar number 1? I refer to these as pillars, almost like as the logo of Wealth Builders is 7 pillars lined up with a roof on the top and a foundation underneath. So we're just going to describe each of those. So for most people then, they live in a home, doesn't create income, so it's a 0 recurring income from that asset. Now, the capacity is to generate income from rooms, from the space, from gardens, from the equity in the home. So there are many, many ways to create income from it, but most people don't do that. The second, the most overlooked and undervalued of all, Stephanie, and you mentioned that in your introduction to me, is the pension. Most people have got pensions which are part of their past. They take them out when they're in a job, or they take them out because their dad told them to do it in their 20s or 30s. So they tend to accumulate kind of a patchwork quilt of pensions that don't do anything other than they are a reflection of where people have been, and what they get is then a sort of a disconnected lump of money, which is on invariably the stock market, usually with heavy charges, often without any real review. And as a result, it's difficult to keep connected to what's really going on. And for the vast majority of people, their biggest source of retirement wealth is their source of biggest disconnection. It's money in pensions that they have no clue how much that's going to turn into. Now, as an economist, which is my original degree, how you assess that is, on average, it's about 4% of the value of the pot. Well, the average investor in the UK, when they reach retirement, it's got about 200,000 in the pot. Well, do the maths. You know, if you're relying on the pension and getting £8,000 a year, and you still don't know how it's going to work because you've still got volatility in the stock market, then you've got to wait to get your state pension, which is going back and back and back and back. So it's not really a recipe for great success. So what do people do? Well, they have money in the bank, which of course doesn't earn much in terms of interest, or they invest in ISAs and other things, which again tends to be over concentrated in the stock market. So when you see what people are adding up in their life, which is an over-reliance in pillar number 2 and pillar number 3 in the stock market, and having a home, what tends to happen is then they realize how little their pensions, their investments are going to give them as a long-term retirement income, 4%. So even if they've saved 200,000 their pension, 100,000 in ISAs, it's still only 300,000 at 4%, 12 grand, 1,000 a month. What tends to happen is they have to downsize.
Yes.
They end up going back to the home and go, oh, dear me. And then they sell the house. But of course, they've built up no wisdom. They've accumulated no knowledge. And all they then do is sell a very nice house. Say they live in a house, sell it for 400. They buy a flat for 200, right? Downsize. They make 200, but 200 in the bank giving them 1% is only another 2,000 a year. Or 200 in the stock market is just going to give them another 8,000. So they move from 12 to 20, but they're living in a tiny place, and life is full of compromise and uncertainty. It's really not a great story. And the vast majority of people are in that place, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah, and what you just said there is so important, that it's not most how much you've got, it's what you do with it, because it's all about what you've got in the mind. So what you could do with £200,000 is very different to what Joe Bloggs, who's never heard about any of this, could do with the exact same £200,000.
And more than that, of course, as we'll touch on leverage. So the entrepreneurial pillars, if we flip across the other side of our square or circle or 7-legged spider, number 4 is a property portfolio. Number 5 is a business, and I'll qualify each of those as well. Number 6 is intellectual property. And number 7 is joint ventures. These are slightly more difficult to explain because people won't naturally have heard of those in the same ways they've heard of their home and their pension and their investments. Now, the thing to understand is every form of asset has a form of income. And when we're building wealth, we're trying to assess the level of income we need to pay the lifestyle that we want. And everybody's got a different number. It could be 3,000 a month, it could be 5,000 a month, it could be 25,000 a month. Everybody's got a different number. And the way you assess where you are is you take the figure that means something to you. The average in my community for financial security, in other words, they feel they could give up the day job, which then gives them more time, of course, is somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 a month on average. And the amount of money that would give them complete financial independence on average about 10,000 a month.
Mm.
So if someone sets a target of, say, 4,000 a month, you'd say, how much is coming in today from your home? Zero. How much is coming in today from your pension? Zero. How much is coming in today from your investment? Well, if you're just investing in the stock market for growth, that's zero. Crumbs. There's no way I could give up the day job, so you then cling to the day job because there's no possibility of you being able to exit. So the other income streams that flow, which is a critical thing, is cash flow. It's income that flows from each asset. They all work differently, which is why it's important to get a grounding in all of them so that you begin to frame, well, what you think might work for you or what combination might work for you.
Mhm.
So building a portfolio of property can mean many things, but it generally means some form of income flowing from rental.
Yeah.
Whether it's rent to rent, whether it's buy to let, whether it's HMO, whether it's serviced accommodation, whether it's supported living, whether it's commercial property, whatever property it is, there's some form of tenant, landlord, or tenant agreement where the rental income flows from the capacity in that property.
Mhm.
And that, obviously, in the UK is the most popular asset of all, and it's the easiest to replicate and to duplicate, and it's the easiest to also use money in the traditional pillars to build. So I'll come back to that one in a moment and show how easy that can be. The fifth is a business that works without you. And the essence of a good business, and this is what we teach in our program, are three key ingredients. Number one, a high degree of recurring income in the business. So the business auto delivers. It auto ships, the four ways to do that. It auto ships product. It auto ships a service or auto delivers a service. It creates membership programs, or you create a gateway so that you provide a network for people to come through like toll gates in the same way as Bill Gates did. You create that, and there are ways to think about that and to use your unique individual skills to bring any of those four ideas to bear. And my skill is to create recurring income businesses. So the business, high degree of recurring income in a highly specialized niche, and the business, once established, does not need the owner to run it. So it means you've got the business generating recurring income for you, or because it's a highly prized auto rotating machine, you can sell that for a premium. So whether you want the capital or whether you want the cash flow, both are possible. And that's my favorite asset because it plays to my heart and soul as an entrepreneur. I love
Mm.
creating and inventing businesses that serve the needs of people with a high degree of recurring, predictable income.
Yeah.
The sixth one then is intellectual property. So, you've written books, I've written books. I think you might have given me credit for 5 books. I think I've only written 3. So I need to write another 2 just to catch up, but that's fine. I've got one in the making, which is called Wealth Building for Kids.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, because I'm just so fed up with the lack of financial intelligence being transferred on by the schooling system that I'm going to do something about that myself. But that's for another day. Maybe you can invite me back again when that book's ready for launch. But as I was saying about, books are a form of intellectual property. And intellectual property then is a way to repurpose, to re-engineer what your experiences, how you've done it in the same way you've done with the Rent to Rent Success book and also the podcast. You're bringing IP to life, which then broadens your reach, gives you more authority and authenticity, and allows you to have permission to create membership programs, to create training programs, and also to give the nicest sounding income of all, Stephanie, royalties.
Yes.
Don't you just love the way that sounds? I'm being paid royalties today. It just sounds great. So I love royalties as well. And then the seventh form of asset is joint ventures, which is where instead of thinking of yourself, because we all in some way are limited by our time or by our resources, we are then collaborating and connecting, bringing something that somebody else is bringing. You bring something, they bring something. And that collaboration can create wealth in a way that you would not be able to do on your own. whether you become a bank and you become a lender, where you become a joint venture partner, however you do it, there's a way to create wealth without you doing the work. You're bringing some other resource to the table. And these are the 7 assets that if you start to become curious about them, you begin to get a sense of, well, what combination might work for me? And if you can build wealth in 7 and get an income stream from all 7 as you go around the table there, as I've been able to do, then you can create revenue from every angle. And that makes you financially bulletproof. And it also means you accumulate wisdom, so you don't need to downsize because you know what you're doing. And for every 200,000 you've got, as an example, as you said, I can create substantially more with the wisdom I've accumulated over the years and the distinctions and intellectual shortcuts that I'm able to make and also to teach to others. So they know that if they had 200,000, they could probably get an average of 10% as opposed to an average of 4%. And that dramatically transforms the amount of money you need to build the life and the wealth that you need for yourself and to teach it to the next generation. Because if you've got wisdom, it's not just, what am I going to get when dad dies? It's you bring them into the equation earlier on. So they become part of a family wealth plan, trust funds and other things, not to overwhelm people with the complexity of that, but just to say, isn't it nicer to think of yourself as the pioneer of a wealth journey for your generation and the ones who will celebrate you in 150 years from now? Going, I'm glad Stephanie Taylor did that. I'm glad Kevin Whelan did that. And you're bringing the wisdom as well. And you can chart that, you can record that, you can document that in a way that just brings an imagination for the future generations as well, so that they never go back to the tradition of pillars 1, 2, and 3. Get a good job, hope for the best. It's not a recipe for success in any book that I would ever write.
Yes, well, I that was fantastic, Kevin, and I really got that warm, fuzzy feeling inside when you were saying that is the legacy that we want to leave for our families and beyond. Beyond our families in trust, where we might be leaving a legacy. So, just to recap, Kevin, on the 7 pillars. Let me see if I've got it right. I do listen to Wealth Talk, so. And number 1, home capacity. 2, investments.
Pensions, number 2.
2, pensions. 3, investments.
Correct.
4, property. 5, business. 6, IP, and 7, JVs.
Correct.
Wonderful. And I just want to just make a note here that if I had heard all this, when I was back a few years ago at my 9 to 5, I would have thought, okay, well, that's all very well for those people over there who got all the things that I thought that people had that I didn't have. But what I want to just say to people who may be listening or watching and feeling a little bit overwhelmed, it actually doesn't take long. Because we are, as I say, just approaching our 5th birthday in the full time in property and thinking more about investing and growing our wealth. And we're working in all of these assets, actually, all of these wealth building pillars. And so it's just phenomenal what you can achieve in a short time. And I know that you have lots of guests come on your podcast, Kevin, who've really made substantial leaps forward in their wealth building, also in short periods. I don't know if you want to offer any insights from some of those transformations.
Well, I think the interesting thing for people at the beginning of their journey is we create something called the wealth thermometer. If you imagine, when you were a child and you had a thermometer and you'd kind of fill it in, or you could see the temperature rising and the red bar moving. We kind of create a wall chart for that. And we get people to start, if they've got 0, to find the first £100 a month. Don't think about the 5,000 target or the 4,000 target, the 10. Get your first £100 a month. Then make £200 a month. And we have a mantra, which is never let 30 days go by without building your wealth in some way. Now, that doesn't mean you're increasing your thermometer every month, but you're doing something in education. You're doing something by being connected. You're doing something by evaluating. Every 30 days, you're doing something so you don't get overwhelmed. You just measure the next 30 days.
Mm.
So to the insights and other people, there are people who, one of my clients who I think you've spoken to before, who was a corporate guy, said was in the kind of pensions financial wilderness for 25 years, doubled a pension it took him to build 25 years in 25 months. He literally doubled the pension because he used the money for commercial property developments. Other people have used their home to create something small like the rent-a-room scheme, which is £7,500 tax-free. And then they use that £7,500 to get a good education in something that equipped them with the ability to do that. Or they could use that money to learn about rent-to-rent. So because they don't have a lot of money to start, they could use your learnings on how to do that, so they can begin a journey of understanding that they can create value for other people without necessarily thinking, I need money to make money. You don't. You need resources, but these ones. It's the resourcefulness that's in people that's missing. And sometimes they'll shut themselves down because they look at the huge plethora of this, 7 pillars, multiple strategies with every pillar. That's 150 ways I could build my wealth. That's too many. It's too many. It's too many. Just start with one, and that's what we do. So in the podcast, we talk about the 3 Ds, right? The drifters, the DIYers, and the dynamics. The drifters are people who'll hear it, but they'll just bury their head in the sand and they'll still be thinking about it in 5 years' time. Mm-hmm. The DIYers will want to do everything at lowest cost. They won't start one thing until they've finished another. It's everything is the cost, the cost, the cost. It's never seen as an investment. It's just the cost of anything. And the dynamics realize you have to put things together, like a dynamo and a wheel. There has to be energy created. And as long as you've got energy and you allow yourself a little bit of time, a couple of hours a week, even 1 hour a week, ideally 2 hours a week, that's enough to start a wealth building journey. And that's what I encourage everybody to do. Find 2 hours a week, get a little bit of education, find a place of support, get good connections, brings education to life. That's all you need to get going. And you can find that in so many different places.
Yes, and you actually have an incredible community. What I really love about what you do at Wealth Builders is that you've broken it down into step by step. You've got lots of ideas of what people can do, but also you've got the experience of having had this community of people do the various different things, see what works, and you can really advise people, and they can have that community of others to support them as they make what might feel in the beginning a little bit scary. So where can people come to find out more about the 7 pillars and about working with you?
Sure. Well, wealthbuilders.co.uk is the website, and there's so many free resources there. We love to give away things for free, Stephanie, because we don't want people to feel like, they're out there and somebody's trying to push them down one path or another. I think in the UK, in fact, as far as I know, worldwide, we are the only completely agnostic company when it comes to how people build wealth. So we're not training them on you should do property, you should do business, you should do IP, you should do. We just have the breadth of really great connections, best in class connections in anything, whether you need an advisor to just cut the pension cost you've got to the minimum. So at least more of your money is growing that way. Whether it's to look at the difference between a SIP and a SAS, whether it's to create a property portfolio. We just know the best people, and we'd encourage people to get connected so they can bring a little bit of knowledge to life. And therefore, all we're doing is curating the best quality people that are those people interested in wealth can go and get their education from. So we're not the educator, we're the coach, the guide, the step-by-step process, and the due diligence final check to say, are you now ready? Take the action, see them with the thermometer growing £100 a month, £500 a month, £1,000 a month. And we get people with their kids filling in the wall chart, as the money's going up and the kids are learning and they're moving through milestones and barriers. And the big celebration, of course, is security. Because once people get to security, they can literally give up the day job because the income they've got coming from their wealth assets is more than enough to cover their life and their expenses. So now, because they don't need to be in the day job, all the time they were spending in the day job, trading time for money at whatever hourly rate they were on, now becomes money that will pay them forever. And that's the difference between work income or trading time for money income and asset income.
Yeah, I think you've explained it so well, and I love the way that you have weaved some stories in there and given us an insight into some of the feelings that we might have going into this and some of the satisfactions that you get as you start building out these legs, even if it's not something that you've considered before. Now is a great time to get started, especially as we're in the lockdown. It's a fantastic time for learning, for connecting with other people within the community or within the Wealth Builders community to start seeing your temperature rise, if we want to put it that way.
No, that's a great way to do it. It's a bit like the dynamo again. Heat creates its own energy, and you get light, you get energy, you get inspiration, you get an incredible sense of well-being, not just for yourself, but also you're seeing other people doing it as well. That keeps you going when times are difficult, but a source of, really true connections, which I think you've seen in our community, people supporting each other, buddy groups and coaching calls every month. There's just so many different ways that support can come. Because, wealth building is a kind of a lonely business.
Yeah.
Especially if we're surrounded by people in jobs, why on earth would you think about, property, or why on earth would you think about creating a sideline as an income stream to build, to learn? They just don't think that way. They're still hardwired for the old tradition, but they're going to get a severe wake-up call in the future. And what you don't want to be is surrounding yourself with people who will be naysaying and competing with your time. Get connected to other people. I like what you guys are doing, and I love what we're doing, and the podcast will at least give people free insights so they can do when they're running, when they're walking, whether, whatever they're doing to multi-layer the limited time that they've got to get something that they can take one action on. And there are so many things they could do on their own without any form of guidance at all that will at least start to build monthly actions that they take some small step that leads them towards the pathway of freeing up money, which they can start to invest in any one of those 7 pillars.
And I just want to add that it's so much fun. I mean, since I've started on this path 5 years ago, I feel so much younger, and I feel as though I've had a new lease of life, because there's so much energy goes into it, as you were saying, but it's in a good way. I feel so much better about my life now than previously, when I may have been doing less, and in some levels had fewer responsibilities in many ways. So I do encourage people to get started.
What's interesting for me is look at the difference between you and me. I'm a wizened old geezer, right? And you're a fresh young thing, blooming with life and the big smile on your face. 5 years. I'm sure you didn't have a smile on your face at the beginning when you were wrestling with the choices, but 5 years of hard work and energy for a lifetime of freedom, however you measure that: financial freedom, relationship freedom, purpose freedom, so many different things. It's worth putting in some of the effort. It took me 15 years because I had to plot my own path. No guidance, no mentorship, no hand at all. It was carving a path based on intellect. And there's so many shortcuts now that can be taken. You've got a success podcast, you've got a book. That's a shortcut. People can buy those things, participate in those things. And I'd just say, find as many different ways to find the first thing to take an action on. Otherwise, you could consume too much. And this leads me to a point, actually, and I don't mind making this one, which I do focus a lot on education. but heard me talk earlier on about children. I
Yeah.
think the challenge with the word education, which the root of that is educare, which really means to draw out. So the purpose for me and Wealth Builders is to give people enough education to then draw the action out. What sometimes worries me about the kind of overall, let's call it the kind of wealth and property training side of things, is the temptation is to cram in. Because every time you cram something in, they can sell another course. Anytime you cram something in, you think it's a pathway for the magic bullet or the secret to success in 12 months. You can't do it in 12 months. It takes longer than that. So take enough education to take an action and draw the energy out rather than cramming it in. And it's the same with kids. We cram kids full of things that aren't necessarily useful to them. We don't teach them about money in school. We just almost begin to cram out the creativity in them, that instead of collaborating, which is cheating, you have to do tests. There's no point in doing a test. You can collaborate. You don't need to do a test on wealth. It's the whole process is different. That's why it's important to me to try and bring that to kids as soon as when the new book is ready. So looking forward to that very much.
Yeah, me too. Kevin, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You have such a great way of explaining things and making it really intriguing and compelling. Is there anything that I haven't asked you today that you were hoping to have spoken about and that you would like to leave our listeners with about wealth building?
No, I really don't think so. I think you've drawn out all of the key ingredients, which is just finding something to get started. The key is taking an action, not thinking about taking an action. Because in 5 years' time, when you and I have looked 60 months and we've seen dramatic transitions, you don't want 5 years to go by and you look back and think, oh, yeah, I remember that podcast in 2021. I really should have taken action, but I didn't. I just got on with the day job. Do something about it and don't wait. Make 2021 the year you do something to start building your wealth.
Yes, that is a phenomenal way to leave this episode. And Kevin, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Make your one action perhaps to go and listen to the Wealth Talk podcast and also visit the website wealthbuilders.co.uk and get some of those free materials that are there available for you. I want to thank you, Kevin, for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank you all for watching and for listening. And until next week, have a great rest of the week. And remember, believe bigger, be bolder, be a game changer. See you soon. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.